great Bobby Marks. You can follow Bobby if you're not already. Shame on you on Twitter, at BobbyMarks42. Harry, this guy, front office insider for ESPN NBA, but made his chops in the front office with the Nets, New Jersey, then Brooklyn. One of the best in the business, not only analyzing the game, the up-and-comers coming into the league, but also how the league really works from the front office perspective. So it's a pleasure. And you've heard Bobby a lot with Mike Gill right here on 97.3 ESPN in the afternoons. Bobby, it's a pleasure. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
You got it. Hey, guys. How you doing?
Doing great.
All right, let's rip the Band-Aid off right away. Jimmy Butler, what are you hearing?
Jeez, we don't even ease him into this, do we?
Because Bobby's going to give it to us straight. He knows more than anybody, so I figure why wait? Why ease into the shallow end? We need to dive deep into the deep end, Bobby.
Well, I mean, I guess if we want to play fantasy basketball, then we can say, yeah, Jimmy Butler's going to sign in Houston with with a team that's $30 million over the salary cap. So maybe we can at least try to put that to bed for right now, unless they start moving a lot of money there, and that goes for Miami too. I think if you're Philadelphia, and I think if you're Butler, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a max offer on the table, and I think that's kind of what's going to be the cost of keeping Jimmy Butler. It's either, I think the question will be what the years will be. If it's 4 years, 140, or 5 for 190, and although I've been skeptical all along on certainly the back end of that contract, we all should be, right? I mean, you see what's going on with Chris Paul right now, probably not a tradable contract. It's the cost of doing business in this league, right? I mean, you just hopefully that he can play at that high level, going forward. But it's like, what if it's not Jimmy? It's like, what's the alternative here? Or Tobias? What's the alternative? Yes, we can talk about $60 million in cap space all along, but as we've seen in the past 2 summers, that doesn't get you much. It's, they went out and did their free agency during the season, and now comes the point where they're going to have to pay these guys.
Hey, Bobby, if you were in Elton Brand's shoes, would you be focusing more on trying to, as they call it, run it back? In other words, get both of these guys, Harris and Butler, to re-sign and go with the team that you had together for 20-some-odd games as a starting lineup? Or would you try to allocate maybe a Tobias Harris contract in different ways?
Oh, I would try to run it back. I mean, I think this league is wide open, guys. I mean, I think I think it's as open as it's ever been in the last probably 6 or 7 years, even when Miami had the big 3 towards the tail end here. I mean, you're seeing the trend right now with, at least out west, with the Anthony Davis trade, the Mike Conley Jr. trade yesterday, that, teams see that Golden State is vulnerable. I know Toronto's the world champions, but they see this league being wide open, and we don't know what will happen with Kawhi in Toronto here. So I think if you have the opportunity to bring that, that starting group back, I know what the cost will be. Then you do so, and then it will be a matter of kind of how do you figure out what the bench will be. What do you do with JJ, who's been really good for you. Tonight's certainly important at where they're picking, as well as some of those second round picks here. But yeah, I think you got to have a seat at the table, right? To kind of, be one of those teams that can compete for a championship. And I think bringing these 2 guys back does put you at the table here.
Bobby, I think when you look at how wide open the league is, we were talking about this before you came on, and we actually went back to that lockout, that shortened season, that 98-99 season, as far as 6, maybe 7 teams in the West, 3-4 teams in the East. It feels like, to your point about the last 4 or 5 years, it feels like we haven't had this league that's been so top-heavy, this wide open, to where maybe 10 legit contenders enter this league in like 20 years.
Well, you're right. I mean, you look at the Western Conference. I mean, that's going to be, and put Golden State on the side right now, but that's going to be a slugfest. And the East is so wide open too, because if Kawhi leaves Toronto, that takes them a couple notches down. You see what's going on in Boston, right? With that team with Kyrie and Al Horford.
Oh, we love it.
It's kind of a retool around some of these young guys. That takes that team a step back. I think Milwaukee will certainly be up there if they bring Middleton and Brogdon back, and then the rest of the East is kind of Indiana and Brooklyn and Orlando. So yeah, I mean this East is wide open. The whole league is wide open. I think it's great for the league. I know it's at the expense of Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson having significant injuries, but the reality of it is that it's great for us to talk about, and I think it gives teams hope. You know, teams have been real conservative as of late, based on Golden State sitting on top, the big bully sitting on top of the mountain here, and now the bully got hit with a couple rocks in that Toronto series, and now teams see this team really vulnerable.
Bobby Marks, front office insider for ESPN, joining us here on the Lighthouse Insurance guest line. Now, Bobby, obviously, a lot of moves will be made here, and once the league new year starts. What do you think is going to be the first? I know we've already had the Anthony Davis trade, which will finalize, but as far as free agent movings, what do you think the first domino will be as far as free agents?
I don't think it will be Kawhi, because I think with Kawhi, he'll take his meetings with Toronto, certainly with probably the Clippers. We'll see if there's other teams out here, and certainly from a view as far as how he works at his own pace, right? So he's not going to be rushed to decide on what his future here. So I would put him to the side, but that's probably the biggest domino here. But I think you'll probably see Klay Thompson probably right off the bat, back to Golden State. I would be surprised me if that doesn't get done. The first day they're allowed to talk to players here. The Kyrie situation is fascinating. It really is. I think if you're Brooklyn, I would have second thoughts about adding Kyrie Irving to my roster if there is nobody else coming with me. To the point where I would probably even rather have D'Angelo Russell than Kyrie Irving, and a younger D'Angelo Russell and a less inexpensive D'Angelo Russell, and then maybe they're the team that maybe tries to pry Tobias Harris from the Sixers here. So, yeah, there's just we'll probably be in a little bit of a holding pattern because of Kawhi. But I think if there's a sure bet, if you're asking me kind of who's that first guy to come off, I would think it would be probably Klay, probably a guy like Chris Middleton back to Milwaukee.
All right, let's explore the Kyrie scenario, because that's fascinating to me. What happens if, in fact, that plays out? Brooklyn says, listen, man, we can't get anybody else. We'll roll with the Bobby Marks scenario and keep our guys in-house. What happens with Kyrie at that point?
Well, then you're looking at, does he kind of put his tail between his legs and go back to Boston? Is that repairable? Right? I mean, is that a repairable situation? I don't think it is by all accounts here. And now you're really looking at probably the Lakers, right? I mean, you're looking at maybe even the Clippers. I know they've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but if Kawhi goes there, does the Clippers look in that direction here? But you look at the teams that have cap space, and it's Brooklyn and New York certainly, but that's a team that he's going to have to be content that they're rebuilding. The two LA teams, and then Dallas and Indiana and Sacramento, Atlanta. Some of those we'll take Philly out of the mix because of Butler and Tobias, but those are the teams that that Kyrie will be looking at. So I think it'd be fascinating if it's the Lakers that are kind of that team in waiting, and if I was the Lakers, I wouldn't recommend that either, just because I think you need to use that money to kind of split up and use on your bench and fill out your needs.
Wow, talk about a rock-hard place. I feel like Kyrie would probably rather put his tail between his legs and play with LeBron as opposed to
the
tail
Celtics,
between the legs and play for Brad Stevens and the Celtics.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's the writing's kind of all over the wall, right? I mean, like as far as where this is heading, I think for Boston too. I mean, they're trying to make moves. I think Woj reported that they're trying to move that Aaron Baines contract so they can create more room and then become a free agent player, because the only way they're going to do that is with the assumption that Kyrie Irving will not be back next year.
Follow Bobby on Twitter at BobbyMarks42. Last one from me, Bobby. Draft tonight, Sixers with the 24th pick and a couple of high second-round picks. With the way their top-heavy roster is right now, they really need to hit on one of these. Two would be great, but that's probably asking too much. To be kind of like the Landry Shamet kind of guy that can really give them some good minutes and guys that can make shots. What is the biggest challenge to drafting down the line in the late first round and really trying to find a guy that can make your roster?
Well, I think it's a matter of, are you waiting on best available, or is it based on need? I think that usually when you set up your board, you're basing it on the best 60. When you take into all accounts medical background, scouting, analytics, and you go from there. Now, are you willing to deviate off that if there's a player that maybe there's a wing there that's you had him ranked 27th on your board? And I think that's that's usually the philosophies that teams take. I think it would be interesting to see what they do with some of these second-round picks. They've got two good ones at 33 and 34. I mean, those and even at 42, those got value. I mean, those are almost like late first-round picks. Is there an opportunity to maybe package both and maybe try to get into the 20s? And so you get, maybe you turn that over and you move up 8 or 9 spots. I think that's something that you have to look at. And if you bring back Jimmy and Tobias, you're going to be restricted as far as what you can use in money. So you're right. You got to nail on you got to hope Zaire Smith, stays healthy, develops. We forget about him from last year. And you have to hope that, at least 2 out of these players are part of, the long-term picture and that can contribute next year.
Bobby, thanks so much for the time. We know it's crazy for you today and tonight as well. Coming along at Bobby Marks 42 on Twitter and the draft coverage tonight on ESPN that I know you'll be a part of. Thank you,
Can't
sir.
wait. Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks, guys. You're welcome.
All right.
Got it.
There he is, Bobby Marks 42 on Twitter.